I posted a video about the 5 reasons why you should work at the Big Four. That video was a very positive, optimistic look at the Big Four. That being said, this video is going to be the exact opposite. In this video, I'm going to talk about the 5 reasons why you shouldn't work at the Big Four. I have to stress, like I did in that other video, but in the other way around, this video is going to be a very negative, pessimistic, devil's advocate look at what it's really like to work at the Big Four in terms of all the bad elements when it comes to working there. Number 1, it's very monotonous. This is, in my opinion, one of the worst parts about it. I'm just going to be straightforward. All you are doing is crunching numbers. And what's unfortunate, and the reason why I'm going to start off this video with this point, is when I was in college, I kept saying to recruiters, teachers, to employees working there, like, look, I'm not gonna lie, I like accounting, I like math, but I don't want to be crunching numbers for the rest of my life. And I was assured, and they would even stress me, like, Mark, don't worry. It is not just crunching numbers. Like, you can be talking to people, you're gonna be doing auditing, it involves a lot of psychology and human interaction. I'm like, okay, you know what? This sounds kind of cool. Like, see what happens. All you're doing is crunching numbers. I even did a video about the biggest myths when it comes to the Big Four, and this is the biggest one that they tell you over and over and over again, almost annoyingly like a broken record, like, trust me, you're not just gonna be crunching numbers. That's not what the Big Four is about. Nope, that's exactly what it's about. And I think I would almost rather, when I was going through this whole like interviewing, hiring, process for the internship and all that kind of stuff, I'd almost rather someone say, look, I'm not going to lie, yeah, it is a lot of crunching numbers, but the Big Four does set you up. And I've talked about that in the previous video, about the reasons why you should work there. The Big Four is an amazing springboard. That being said, all you are doing is crunching numbers. My first day, and I remember this so vividly, I walked into the audit and I was like super excited, like a very eager, energetic intern, right? Which sometimes is kind of like a joke among a lot of people who work there because they're like, oh, here's another intern being excited about the job. And I'm like, all right, what do you want me to do? They're like, all right, we have a huge stack of papers. I'm like, all right, got it. And they're like, okay, you see all these numbers? And I'm like, yep, I see them. And like, okay, there's another number at the bottom. We want to make sure, can you add up all the numbers, make sure it equals that number, and then put a red check mark with this red colored pencil? And I'm like, yeah, done. Add them up, equal that number, put a check mark. And I'm like, all right, what next? And they're like, well, you do the next one. And for my first ever day, working at the Big Four for 8 hours straight, all I did was literally add up numbers using a calculator, made sure it equaled another number, put a check mark. That was it. That was it. That is very indicative of what you're going to be doing at the Big Four. And yes, the higher up you go, there is going to be more maybe technical work, more critical thinking, yes. But at the end of the day, all you are doing is crunching numbers. Number 2, busy season is not just during busy season. This is another big myth that I hate the Big Four and recruiters and other people try to pitch you. What they say, and I even remember this, is they're like, yeah, busy season, it sucks. We're not going to sugarcoat it. It is bad. But after busy season, the rest of the year is 9 to 5. Sometimes in the summer, maybe even 9 to 3. And I'm like, hey, you know what? That's not bad. Like maybe for like 4 months out of the year, it's going to be rough. But for the rest of the year, being 9 to 5 or even 9 to 3, not bad, especially with my starting salary, which we'll talk about in a bit later in this video. Not too bad. Not the case. Absolute BS. 2 main things about this, which is very important. 1, it depends upon your client. This is a big one. There are some clients, and you're going to hear about this. If, let's say, you start getting into the weeds of the Big Four that are just horror stories, that if you pull up your schedule and you're like, oh my God, I'm on Joe Schmo client or blank and blank client. I'm not going to say any names for legal reasons. I'm on this client. You're like, my life's over. And what's unfortunate, and this is part of being a salary employee, this is part of an unfortunate part of the real world, you're going to get paid the exact same amount as someone else. Meaning, I had friends who were on a typical client that for the most of the year, they were 9 to 5. Busy season was busy season. They got paid the exact same amount as another one of my friends who got put on a bad client and they were working 80-hour weeks. Double of what this other person was working, they made the same exact amount of money. That's the first thing. Your client can make or break you. And secondly, on top of that, they try to pitch that busy season is just one small chunk of time. The rest of the year is very easygoing. No. Depending on your client, and again, this goes now to the client as well, there can actually be sometimes rolling busy seasons. One of my friends was on this. It was a mutual funds client where each fund actually had a year end, but at the end of each month, meaning for about 8 or 9 months out of the year, he was in a straight, nonstop busy season. And for maybe 2, 3, or 4 months out of the year, more closer to 2 or 3, he had an easygoing schedule. It was almost the reverse of what you expect when it comes to a typical Big Four schedule. And this is another horrible thing I think when it comes to working at the Big Four. One of the most annoying things, because at least if they were like, hey, you're on this bad client, you're now going to work double what this other person's working, but we're going to give you some bonuses. We're going to pay you a little extra. Nope. They're going to work you as hard as they want, however they want. You're kind of at the mercy to the roll of the dice that is the client selection, and this is one of those situations that you can be working an extreme, intense, unbelievable amount of hours, and your busy season could potentially be almost the entire year. Number 3, you are severely underpaid. Now, this is an interesting yin and yang from the previous video that I posted yesterday, because in that video, I said, well, you actually do have a high starting salary. Half true, half false. Here's the reason why. Being super transparent, I started at Deloitte as an auditor in September of 2012, and my starting salary was $57,000 a year. And right out of college, I'm like, wow, that's a lot of money. I mean, my rent and utilities in Boston equal $1,000, which is crazy to look back on. When it comes to bills, not that much more. I mean, I had one of the highest starting salaries of any one of my friends where I could go out, get rounds of drinks, go to a restaurant, I wasn't balling out, of course, but that's a pretty good starting salary, especially back in 2012. That being said, when you look at other financial positions, accounting positions, and other different sectors, or pretty much any other business or niche, you are severely underpaid. And the main reason why is if the Big Four was truly, and it's just the word truly, 9 to 5, it'd be a bit different, right? We're like, okay, 9 to 5 all year, maybe even 9 to 3, as they say, right? If it was truly 9 to 5 all year or 9 to 3 all year during the slow period, which there is no slow period at the Big Four, by the way, no pro tip, I would be like, wow, you're getting paid a good amount. Not the case, though. The reason why is, like I said, you could have a rolling busy season. You could be put on a bad client. When you actually do the math out, the hourly amount you're making is horrible. And so, yes, while you do start off with a decently high starting salary, especially right out of college, the amount of hours you're working in correlation to how much you're making is not there whatsoever. Like, if anything, I'm going to be honest. I look at it very comparable, or a good analogy, I think is a better way to word this, to investment banking. In case you don't know, when it comes to investment banking, you're working 90 to 100 hour weeks. I remember I knew somebody or heard about somebody who, when they were an investment banker, one day a week they'd have to pull an all-nighter, and they did this for 7 years in a row. Now they're raking all the benefits. 7 years, you pay your dues. But when it comes to investment banking, you're working 90, 100 hour weeks every week, but your starting salary is 150, 160K, whatever it is, right? It does depend. But they're basically saying, hey, you're going to get paid a lot, but you're also going to work a lot. We're not going to sugarcoat this. With the Big Four, you are almost working quasi-investment banking hours while making a third of what investment makers make sometimes. And that, I think, is what's very unfortunate about the Big Four, that it is such, like I said a couple times already, a roll of the dice, because depending on your client, depending on what's going on, I had friends. I remember one friend, for example, got put on a client. It was a sugar honey iced tea show, if you catch my drift. It was a bad client. There's a lot of negative stuff going on. He worked for 3 or 4 months, 12 hours a day. Saturday and Sunday was about 9 to 5. He worked 7 days a week. And if you're thinking, wait a minute, aren't there 7 days in a week? Yes, he worked every day for almost 3 or 4 months. And at the end of all of this, all they gave him as a we're sorry type thing was a $100 Visa gift card. I feel like, if anything, that's more insulting. I'd almost rather not get a present or not get a, hey, we're sorry, here's a gift. I'd rather not get a gift of a $100 Visa gift card than get one and they're like, hey, after all this, we know you worked 90-hour weeks, 100-hour weeks, whatever, every week for 3 or 4 months. You only had a few days off here and there. Here's $100. Kind of ridiculous. But that is the thing. Depending on what's going on in the Big Four, And most of the time, it is usually negative. If I had to be honest, positive or negative, and it's usually negative. You are working an insane amount of hours, and it doesn't correlate with the pay. Number 4, it is very antisocial. Now I know this one, not surprising at all. If you had to ask anybody, do you think accountants are social? They'd be like, no. But again, this is one of those weird myths. Again, maybe they've changed their strategy since I did the whole recruiting process and hiring process and interviewing when I was going to be an intern and whatnot at the Big Four. But I was told and stressed, very similar to the whole, like, trust me, accounting is not just crunching numbers. I was stressed that there's a ton of psychology, which is funny to look back on, evolved in accounting, where they're like, hey, you're going to have to be talking to clients all day. We really want someone who's good at human interaction and how to ask people for things. Here's the truth. When you're doing auditing, for example, which is a bit more more social than, like, say, taxes or consulting. Well, I guess it depends on the situation. But when you're doing auditing, right, the big thing you're going to be doing at a client site is walking up to them saying, hey, do you have the invoice? And they're like, yeah. And you're like, thank you. That's it. That's all the interaction. Even on your team, like, I remember sometimes, I'm not a sports guy, I'm going to be honest, but I was in Boston, which is like the sports capital, I feel like, of America. And I remember I'd be like, you know, we'd be working, and I'd be like, so did people catch the Patriots game last night? And they'd be like, and then they just go back to work. And I'm like, I'm just trying to make small talk. Like, I don't know. Like, I was on clients where nobody talked. Now, don't get me wrong. I like to be very transparent in all my videos. And this video is more pessimistic. But I'm also, as well, I have to say, I'm not exaggerating any of these negative points. None of this is hyperbole of how bad it is to work at the Big Four. One thing I will say, as like a nice, maybe silver lining or positive aspect, is some of my friends were on clients, though, because I didn't work at the Big Four that long, where they're like, okay, the work sucks. And they all know it sucks. But you have ever done like a group project in college where you're all hating it, but you're hating it together and you're kind of laughing and joking? Some of my friends were on some projects and dealt with some clients like that, where when they'd be in the auditing room with a group of 10 other people, they'd be laughing and joking at like midnight, being like, can't believe we're here on a Friday night at midnight. Like, I wish I was getting drunk and someone else would make a joke. So although the work was bad, there was some socialness and some camaraderie feel to it. That being said, I have to be honest, I do think it's kind of rare. The Big Four is very, very antisocial. I mean, 99% of the time when I'd be working, I would have my headphones in, listening to a music or a podcast or whatever, and just be crunching numbers. That was it. It is unbelievably antisocial. And last, but definitely not least, number 5, no recognition or fulfillment. This is one that at first you're probably going to be like, I don't care about that. Like, what? Whatever. But this is the one that I've noticed has driven most people, among all these things I've talked about throughout this video, to actually leave the Big Four. And that is this. There is no fulfillment or good feeling, if that's the best way to phrase that, when doing work at the Big Four. It is very, like I said, technical. You get, you crunch all these numbers, and you're like, all I'm doing is auditing a company. No one really gives you praise. No one really gives you fulfillment. Not saying you need it per se or whatever, but I think there is something, like, say, if you look at like nurses or people volunteering or people working in, like, say, the science field, doing something for humanity or society, this is one that will start to eat at you more than you think. Because, one, like I said, you're not being fulfilled. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the video about my first day, I was like, wait a minute, a middle schooler could do what I'm doing. Like, a middle schooler could easily do this. I could maybe even do that in elementary school in 3rd grade to add up numbers on a calculator and make sure to equal to another number. So the work starts to be very unfulfilling. Like, one thing you're going to notice, which is kind of interesting, kind of one of my, an ironic, one of my favorite parts about working at the Big Four that is kind of interesting looking back on, is you're going to see a lot of chain emails. They're usually jokes or funny things. You're going to see this a lot. And there's one I remember that went viral among the Big Four employees because they always send them between firms and within the firm about a guy quitting because he looked and saw that the cleaning lady would go and clean out the trash. And he's like, you know what? That to me is more fulfilling. That she cleans out the trash, she looks, the trash is empty. And she just contributed to society by making society a cleaner place. And he's like, for me, it's almost like no matter how much trash I clean out when doing this audit or doing this taxing or whatever, the trash is always going to be there, right? And in some ways, obviously, he's kind of making a joke and exaggerating, right? Because I will say this, you do need auditors, right? We need to make sure that companies are not doing illegal and immoral things and not doing messed up things, for lack of a better phrase. That being said, though, there is this odd one unfulfilling aspect of the Big Four that after a while you're just like, I'm not being satisfied or happy about the work I'm doing, the work I'm contributing, right, to society. Like, yeah, in some ways it is important to make sure companies are doing and following the right practices, but it's just not fulfilling, right? And then the second thing is the recognition aspect. This is another one too that, and this is a big kind of like fallacy, if I'd call it that, for a lot of first years and especially interns, where you get in and you're like, all right, I'm going to audit the sugar honey iced tea, so to speak, out of this company. And what happens a lot is, like, say as an intern or whatever, you're like, oh, I have 8 hours of work, but I'm going to get it done in 6 hours. I'm going to bust my butt and I'm going to make sure that this is like, I'm going to crush it today. And make sure you get it done within 6 hours. Here's the truth about the Big Four. There's theoretically an infinite amount of work to do. You're never going to have an issue getting more work. And this is what I suggested on a video I talked about 5 ways to crush it at the Big Four. Is not ask for more work, ask for more challenging work. Little cool pro tip. But a big thing I'm going to say is this. Like, you've done 8 hours of work within 6 hours. And they're like, oh, and you're like, oh, I just did it. Yeah. You know, you're pumped up because you tried to like really bust your butt that day. And you're like, hey, I just got it done. They're like, okay, you want more work? Like, no one cares. No one cares that you're working hard. You do get evaluated compared to every other job. I think it's like 1 through 5, 5 being like mind-blowing and unbelievable, 1 being you're horrible. Most people get 3s. And I remember even learning that no matter how hard you work, if you were the most mind-blowing auditor in the world, you're still going to get a 3. Maybe a 4 if you get like a very happy project manager or partner that's on like that's having a really good day and they're like, you know what? All right, I'll give them a 4. Okay, they deserve a 4, right? But no matter what, you almost feel very unrecognized. So no matter how hard or little you work, no one really cares. And that's a big thing too, that the firm, in a very ironic sense of the word accounting, just looks at you as another number in their accounting machine. That's all they look at you as. And again, this is one of those ones that maybe at first you're not going to care about. Because I think for most people, for a video like this, if you've not worked at the Big Four, or like, oh man, the boring work sounds horrible. The long hours, oh, not good. The pay, all these kind of things sound bad. But this is one that I think at first you're going to be like, I don't care if I get recognized or fulfilled. I'm going to clock in, get my work done, clock out. That's all I care about. But this is one that I promise you, especially seeing so many people leave, and the turnaround time at the Big Four is very fast, about 1 year to 2 years is when most people leave. Not getting recognized, being unfulfilled about your work is really going to eat at you more and more, to the point where most people say, you know what? I'm done with the Big Four.